You're listening to Sensitive, Spiritual, and Successful, the podcast where we uncover ways to connect you back to your soul self and get you unstuck to find your flow again in life so that you can live out your full potential. I'm Jasmine Lynn, a former psychotherapist turned human design soul guide and EFT tapping success coach, and I'm here to show you how to love yourself through all your levels of growth. I know you're here because you have an impact you want to make in this world and you have a light to share, and I'm here to guide you through that journey because you deserve soul-aligned success. Okay, coaches and practitioners who are heart-centered and sensitive, I just wanted to share that I am hosting a 3-day virtual Human Design Summit. It is free. This is where you will learn from experts around how to actually apply parts of your chart into your life and business. Here's the outline. Day 1 being shadow work, inner child work. This is based on your design for deeper self-understanding, cultivating self-trust, and not operating out of your wounds. Day 2 is for uncovering your unique gifts and talents, understanding how your energy influences your clients, how to run business according to your unique energy, and activating your own strategy. And then day 3 is really being the whole integration piece. So this is like, as you start to put all those pieces together, these are things that you can take away. So I'm talking about diving into manifesting by design, understanding your signs of burnout, and just so much more. This is going to be so fun, and I know that you are going to want to be a part of it. In the show notes, I will link the wait list there, and you will be the first to know when tickets become available. Okay, getting into this episode, I am talking to Dr. Peta Stapleton, a registered clinical and health psychologist based in Australia, and she is also an associate professor in psychology at Bond University. She is highly regarded in the tapping community for her extensive research in clinical EFT, and she is the author of The Science Behind Tapping. I will provide links to her books in the show notes, and if you're interested, you can also explore clinical EFT training at her website, evidence-based-EFT.com. Let's dive in.
All right. We have Dr. Peta Stapleton here. And thank you, Peta, for being here. And I think this is going to be a really great conversation.
Yep, my absolute pleasure. Looking forward.
Just to jump right in, I was going to say, I think all of us start with tapping. You look at it and it's kind of strange. And then you start doing it yourself. And then you're like, oh, there's something to this. And then you kind of get hooked on it. Can you tell us your first experience with tapping and how that kind of started for you?
Sure, absolutely. I was complaining to a colleague, as you do back in the day. This was nearly more than 2 decades ago now. Mostly because the traditional talk therapies I was using in my clinical practice, which happened to be in eating disorders, I just wasn't having that much success. So I was, if you like, trying to find, I was unconsciously trying to find something, but I was more complaining to him that, I had all these skills and I was doing a PhD and nothing was working. So I felt ineffective. And he said to me, oh, look, I've come across this quite strange, he didn't sell it very well, strange technique, but I think it might be helpful. And I had no idea what he was talking about because he wasn't doing a very good job explaining it. And he said, something about acupuncture points. And he's like, but I think it'll calm people down. And particularly if we're trying to support our clients with anorexia to, keep their anxiety down while they're gaining weight again. Anyway, I dismissed him at the time. And it was about 3 months later, he was I ran a support group locally for the community every week, and he came along to help me out. And a young girl in the middle of the group had a panic attack. So she was sort of, getting really distressed and hyperventilating. So he just sort of took her outside. I kept teaching the lesson. And they came back within about 5 or 6 minutes, and she was really calm. And I remember thinking, and I wrote about this in my book, she was so calm, I thought, oh dear, I hope he hasn't given her any medication or something like that. It was just a bit too strange. So everyone went home and I said to him, what happened there? And he said, I did that tapping thing I've been trying to tell you about. So what I had seen was the outcome of tapping. And obviously I'd seen her be really distressed and she couldn't breathe. And then within about 5 or 6 minutes, she was really calm and composed. And so that was literally the first encounter that I'd ever had. I hadn't even done it on myself. And I kind of said to him, okay, what is this? You need to tell me what this is, because that's just bizarre. I thought you'd given a Valium or something like that. He hadn't. So so the rest, obviously, myself went to a training and things like that. And even then, 25 years ago, it was really strange. We didn't have the science, the understanding. We had no idea how it was working, and obviously that came, but we knew it was, and we were using it with our clients. We didn't have too many strict regulations around us as far as what you were allowed to use, which nowadays we do. But our clients were getting better, and they were trotting back to their doctors saying, oh no, I don't have binge eating disorder anymore. Oh no, I'm recovering from that. And the GP doctors were just like, oh, okay. And so they started writing us letters, just keep doing that tapping thing. I'm sure no one knew what we were doing, but that was sort of the journey and where it started.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, seeing it firsthand, seeing how quickly people can calm, and then going on and doing it yourself, like, oh, maybe I should continue some training with this.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. Now, did you know you always wanted to be a psychologist? And obviously you didn't know you were going to jump into researching tapping.
No,
No.
not at all.
Okay.
If anything, I wanted to be a lawyer. So I watched way too many legal shows as a teenager and thought, oh, that looks really good. I absolutely think I would have been a defense lawyer, not a prosecutor, because I would want to look after the people and, help them.
Yeah.
So I had this track of, I'm going to be a lawyer. And I did spend the first year at university doing some law subject and found them incredibly boring. Sorry to all the lawyers out there. And thought, oh, this is awful. Like, I just couldn't sort of see myself. And so my mother had suggested, we were going through the handbook trying to find an elective subject. And she's like, why don't you do social work? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. But it kind of went down and found this psychology subject and thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Like, it certainly wasn't part of subjects we'd ever been exposed to, but it was all about human behavior and understanding yourself. And I'm like, oh, that's good. So I do this one subject at the end of my first year. And I just, in that split moment, said, I'm changing my whole degree. And everyone went, oh, okay, we thought you were going to be a lawyer. No, I'm just going to do this. No one knew what a psychologist was. It certainly wasn't kind of, as well accepted as it is today. No, EFT tapping wasn't anywhere in my life. So I certainly, that hadn't come across at all. But I was curious, I think, about, anything in that sort of space of understanding yourself. Like, this was way back in jazz. So I'm going to date myself now. So driving in my car, I had a tape recorder,
Yeah.
not even a CD player, a tape recorder.
Yeah.
And I used to drive around and listen to tapes of Louise Hay from the local library, unbeknownst that one day Hay House would publish my book and things like just wasn't even, but it was like I was that person driving around listening to Louise Hay. So yeah, that was, and my whole family are teachers. So I think there's something there in now that I stand obviously in front of a classroom and a lecture theatre or conference presentations. That's probably the part of law that I was thinking was that sharing of knowledge, and that's where I get that sort of, fulfillment. So there is some crossover there that makes sense.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yes, the science behind tapping. You're the author of that book, and it was published by Hay House. When you look back at things like that, the little synchronicities or the little things that the universe or whatever just kind of pushes you towards that, and then to see where you are now, it's like, oh, now I understand why that happened that way.
Always.
I love
Yes.
I love those moments. I went through shifting out of more clinical work into like more human design. I'm writing a book for Human Design Press, and incorporating tapping and all that, and
Fantastic.
all the synchronicities that once I let go of that identity, everything started, like, I'm like, Peta agreed to be on this podcast. This has to be part of the plan. This has to be part of it.
You just don't know till it's done and you look back. Yes.
Right? It's just incredible. I love it. Now, let's just jump into, what is tapping? How does it work? Can you give us an explanation?
Probably the most simple explanation is it's a stress reduction technique. So it obviously uses a gentle tapping technique with two fingers, hence that's why we call it that, on acupuncture points, so known acupuncture points in the body. Whole body of research sort of sitting separately, now showing, we didn't have this 25 years ago, but now showing stimulating acupuncture points definitely has some positive effect on the body system, not just the brain, but the body as well. So it borrows, if you like, on traditional therapy techniques. We use a lot of exposure therapy. So what's probably sounds counterintuitive when we do this tapping technique is we say how we feel, the thing we want to reduce. So if I'm feeling angry or stressed, I would say I feel angry and stressed, but at the same time do the tapping. So we're kind of doing that exposure therapy that's used a lot in other traditional approaches, such as cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's very mindful. So you need to actually be present to what's happening in tapping for it to work. If we randomly walk around just tapping, not a lot happens. So yeah, so it's very much a stress reduction technique. It's obviously used in lots of different, clinical areas. We've done lots of different research trials over the years, but all we're doing is impacting that stress response. So that, is almost a whole body response many, many times, like the autonomic nervous system. So any way we can reduce stress in the body is a good thing. And this just happens to be one where you can self-apply and do it yourself.
And now when we go through the points, I know there's studies, sham points. Can you just give us an overview of like these points and the importance of the points that we use?
Yeah, so the original method, the one that we're testing in research is Gary Craig's basic recipe. So tapping as a modality existed before that, so coming out of kinesiology and certainly acupuncture. And people use different tapping points because there's a lot of acupuncture points in the body. We just use 8 points that are in, obviously, the recipe that the research tests. So it doesn't mean that as long as you're tapping on a known acupuncture point, you're not going to get the outcome. But you're right. There's certainly areas of the body where there's no acupuncture points, for example, the inside of the forearm. So to use an open palm there in a sham study would show whether or not actually tapping on an acupuncture point has an effect, and we have shown that. So the 8 that we use in clinical research, and certainly, people out there might be used to seeing on YouTube or, Instagram, that kind of thing. One on the side of the hand, so we certainly use that one for just getting tuned in or noticing how we're feeling. And then start of the eyebrow, so again, just 2 fingers, start of the eyebrow, side of the eye. So we are hitting a known acupuncture point. So if anyone's ever been for a massage, seen those charts or acupuncture, certainly that's now been shown through different studies. Under the eye is the 3rd one, under the nose, crease of the chin, about an inch under the collarbone, so about an inch down, and you obviously either side. One under the arm. Now I say for ladies, if you're wearing a bra, it's your top bra strap. Otherwise, if you're not wearing one, it's about 4 fingers from your armpit. So that's about where the point is. And then the last one that we use is center of the head. So we use a flat palm. Now, some people start there and continue. That's okay as far as, where do I start? If I skip one, does it matter? In the big scheme of things, no. We obviously try to hit all of those when we're doing research trials, just so that people have got a formula and something to follow. And they came out of Gary Craig's original kind of recipe that came from thought field therapy, which still exists as well today.
Yes. Yes. So the points are important when we are tapping. We're not just tapping random parts of our body.
Yeah, that's right.
So there have been a few studies. We talked a little bit about, you had mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy, and obviously that's a gold standard therapy. Here where I am in Canada, we actually have access to psychotherapy, and it's a CBT program because it is, that gold standard. Can you provide us an overview of how effective EFT is in comparison to CBT?
Yes, and you're absolutely right. Things become gold standards because they've been researched that many times, and absolutely CBT has. But again, we've got a growing body. Now, the last time I looked, probably a dozen studies have included CBT in an EFT trial, as well as other modalities like EMDR or, narrative therapies, things like that. So most of the trials, and I've run about, now I've got to remember, 3 or 4 of those where CBT has been included. All of the studies show that EFT is comparable to the outcomes of CBT. So whether that, and I'll give you some of the topics that have been researched. My team has researched clinical depression, CBT versus EFT, things like food cravings, weight loss in people that are trying to lose weight, that kind of thing, different kind of areas of test anxiety. So giving a speech or sitting a test, like they've been studied, obviously post-traumatic stress disorder, things like that. So when you look at the endpoint and kind of go, all right, whether you go through 6 or 8 weeks of CBT or EFT tapping, the outcomes at that point will look like they're similar, which is a great thing. A lot of people kind of go, oh, I thought EFT might have been superior, but it's a good thing that it's comparable, because we want people to realize there's good choices out there if for whatever reason they've tried a certain therapy and it didn't work for them. But when you look at follow-up points and when you look at when the changes happened in those 2 treatment groups, what you find is the EFT people achieve their outcomes. So say in my depression trial, they achieve them in a faster kind of amount of sessions compared to CBT, but then they maintain them, and they'll maintain them through follow-up points. That could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months after the end of therapy. What happens for the CBT people is they still achieve them, but it often takes them the length of the treatment program. So if I use PTSD as an example, these are colleagues who have done these research studies in the US. They've found that the EFT people achieve a complete remission of any symptoms, including they don't meet diagnosis anymore for PTSD, in 6 to 10 sessions. But it takes in CBT 18 to 24 sessions. So if you only look at, what happens at the end of treatment, they both look like they've achieved the same outcome. But when you look at where does it happen, and, do the CBT people, meet diagnosis again 3, 6 months, 12 months later, or do some of the symptoms come back? There is quite a wide difference there. And I think, that's probably the most important thing to look for if someone's reading a research paper, because it's not just, they get the same outcomes, they're very equivalent. They're not equivalent in terms of how long it takes.
Yes. So it saves a lot of time, a lot of energy from clinicians, I can imagine. And I know
money,
that,
money from the client's point of view. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And when I do my own tapping, I find that, like, I just don't have the same reactions to it, or it's like it's gone. It's like, oh wow, it's when it's cleared, it's cleared. And I had listened to some of your studies in the past where I think it was a food craving one, and you went to go follow up, I don't know, a couple years or a year later, and they're like, "What food craving?" I'm like, "That's crazy."
So common. They do. So that particular study had been a self-paced study. So they had put themselves through a video program over 8 weeks. So it was even better they hadn't had live sessions. So a year later and 2 years later, we did a follow-up. And yeah, they sent emails going, I don't remember what I did tapping on, because we reminded them, but they're like, oh, can't remember the last time I ate that food. And we're like, in the study, And it happened just in our chronic pain trial as well, that I'm getting emails, 6 and 12 months later from following up again a 6-week program, where people are like, I forgot I was in your research trial till I got your email, because I just haven't had any chronic pain. So we've just finished the publication for that paper that's coming out. So it's the same thing. And we do have theories around why does that happen in the brain? Like, why do you not have to keep tapping? Because it kind of makes sense. Oh, well, I'll just reduce stress in the moment. Okay, good. I'm back in my window of tolerance. I can cope. Yeah. But it appears as though just tapping 1 or 2 or even a few times on that one area means you don't have to keep tapping on it, because you just don't have the same reaction, like you just said. And the brain appears to be able to update its learnings there pretty rapidly.
Yeah. So that was my next question is, like, why do you think it's such an effective tool? But it's clear that it's so rapid. And when you really get down to the specifics, or you clear something, oftentimes it just lasts for for as long as it needs to, right? It's no need to really come back,
Mm.
spend more money, more time, more effort, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I have a question around, like I said, I'm writing this book, Human Design, and it kind of uncovered more of our limiting beliefs while following the our design, so that people can really get back to their authentic selves and live up to their full potential. Now, when it comes to working on limiting beliefs, kind of the same thing we were just talking about, I know that memories pop up, right? I'll be tapping on a belief, imposter syndrome or whatever it is, and then a memory pops up, and I'm like, oh, that's probably that's probably why I have that belief. Can you kind of tell us what happens in the brain, or why that's so important to really check in on those memories that do pop up?
Yeah, it seems to be, you can start focusing on something in the present moment. So that could be, oh, I feel anxious about giving that speech, or, what will people think of me, that kind of thing. And you can just tap to sort of lower the intensity of that, whether it's a feeling or a body sensation or whatever it might be. And it could just be a belief as well. What appears to happen is, as the autonomic, that whole body system calms down, the brain is able to, if there's an origin or some memory or some event in the past that contributed to you forming that belief, then the brain is able to give that to you. So, people often talk about the hippocampus being that memory center. Other research suggests memories kind of all throughout the body. But as the body calms down, that's when you're able to access it. And so it might look like a random thought, or, oh, why did I just think about something when I was 10? We say in the tapping world, and certainly our research trials, you should pay attention to that. That could be your brain trying to say to you, hey, this is related. And if we can go back and work, and sometimes people do benefit from having someone support them in this process. So someone highly skilled or qualified, obviously, in EFT. You go back and you process whatever happened when you were 10 or 5 or whatever comes to mind. It could be something last week. Then that appears to kind of, often be the precipitating or the trigger event to why that limiting belief was formed, or a certain belief system, or a core belief about yourself. So if you can go back and you do work through what happened then, and do I still think a certain way about it, we get those long-term changes that we see in the future. And so something like that imposter syndrome might not ever bother you again, because you went back and kind of worked through whatever that time was when you were 10 and someone said something to you in the playground, and
Yeah.
then it kind of, stays with you moving forward. So we're looking for it. Having said that, sometimes it comes up, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes purely tapping in the moment is enough. So we just go with what your brain tells us.
Yes, kind of just following what happens and following
Yeah.
those little clues. I find beliefs can shift so much quicker when I do clear the things that do come up, and then I look at myself and I have a more compassionate way of relating to myself, and I'm like, wait, why was I thinking that way? Why was I saying that to myself? It took me a lot to build courage and like put myself out there and be seen. But just through tapping, my husband has even said, like, there's just such a shift in you. And I just know that when my kids are in bed, I would be in the living room just tapping, doing the personal peace procedure, really just
Yeah.
clearing out any of that stuff that's I've been holding on to. And I just feel like a brand new person, or maybe just more that I knew that I had inside of me. And so that's what I want other people to
Yeah.
realize, that when you clear this, and it can be cleared with EFT in your living room when your kids are asleep, when you're doing your own inner work, you wake up, and every day it's like, wow, I can actually do all these things, and I don't need to be so hard on myself. So it is
Yeah.
just incredible to experience, and I think that's why I want everybody else to experience it too.
Yes.
And I know
Totally.
that, yeah, and having you here, I'm like, PETA will break down what's happening. There's science behind it. It's not just some, what is she doing and what is she talking about? But
Yes.
I have a really fun question for you. So I'm also into goal setting. You could call it manifestation.
Yeah.
I wondered, I'd love to hear how you've been able to clear some of your resistance and make things happen for yourself. I've done money mindset, and just being able to clear the resistance, and then things shift really quickly for me. Do you have any fun stories where you experienced that?
Absolutely. Same kind of thing. Love to set goals, probably just, the Virgo in me. It's like, let's set some goals every year. You know,
Yeah.
I don't get too hung up on, tapping on them, or, I think the very act of actually just becoming intentional. And certainly as a family, we have the magic box, which I borrowed from Vishan from Mind Valley. So the magic box is write your goals, put them in the box, and maybe we tap on them, maybe we do letter writing to the goals, like we do things like that. And then every year we kind of get them out and check. Oh wow, that came true. Oh wow. So yeah, the whole family's kind of on board. Can I give you some stories? Probably the funniest one, which again, it wasn't something, because I think the whole act of making an intention but then letting it go is important. So I might kind of place it into my future in terms of my timeline, but then just letting go of all connection. So unbeknownst to my active memory, 2 years prior to publishing my book with Hay House, obviously I told you the story, I'd listened to Louise Hay, like I used to drive around. I never really thought about, I'm going to write a book one day. Certainly tapping wasn't in my life. And we had, a friend and I had started a conference kind of company, because we really wanted to bring speakers to Australia who really were in this mind kind of, body sort of area. But from a science point of view, because we thought Australians, often didn't get exposure to that kind of thing. So we'd pulled together our first conference, and we'd invited people we wanted to listen to ourselves, as you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we'd invited Dr. Joe Dispenza, because I'm like, oh, I listen to Joe all the time. I saw him in Sydney a couple of years ago. He'd be fabulous. Anyway, we don't hear anything. So girlfriend and I are kind of like, oh, it's like the 20th of December. We're like, oh, well, it's not till May the next year. We'll just let it go. We'll find the right person that, obviously we haven't heard from him. Let it go. So we do our meditations, whatever we do. Anyway, about 3 days later, so just before Christmas, we get an email from his secretary saying, sorry, it's taken us so long, but Joe's actually on the other side of the country in that same week. And he said, yes, he would love to come over and be a speaker. And we were like, oh, wow. Oh, wow, this is huge. Anyway, so fast forward, we get to our first conference. We obviously pick him up. We're chatting. He does his thing. We all do our thing. He heard me speak about tapping. Him and I standing, just getting to know each other on the Sunday. Everyone's in workshops. He says to me, you should write a book. And I'm like, I've written lots of books. What do I write? And he goes, the science behind tapping. And I go, who's going to read that book? Like, what? A bit boring. He goes, no. When I get back to America, I'll talk to Reed Tracy from Hay House. You need to write this book. And I'm like, I'm only going to write this book if you write the foreword. Like, I don't even know this guy. He says, okay. I'm like, oh, how bizarre. Anyway, I let it go. Lo and behold, I do indeed get a phone call, and literally I almost reject Reed Tracy on the phone going, really? Someone going to read this book? And he's like, yeah. Well, I'm like, oh, okay. It's not until I kind of write the book, Joe and I have become really good friends. I've done research with Joe now. We've just finished 2 primary school meditation tapping trials. We've become really close. But it wasn't until I'm about to hand this book in. I'm flicking back through my goals, because I write them all in the same book every year. And I'm just flicking back through the previous years, and I find that 2 years earlier, I've written, I want a full book publishing contract with Hay House. And I'm like, and I've forgotten at this point. I'm like, are you serious? Like, I could never have orchestrated that we would invite Joe. He would say yes. He came back twice for our conferences, and he's since said to me, I don't normally go to those things, but something inside me just said I should go and speak at this conference. So something drew him in. We're talking. He gets this, like, it's just mind blowing, the synchronicity. And you just sort of go, wow. And so now I say, be careful what goals you write down. Because, just the very active, yeah. So like lots of examples like that. My daughter had one herself, a couple of years ago. She wanted to change schools. I didn't even know this. She wanted to, and so she'd written down that she had this beautiful group of girls around her that were her friends, that she was in a school that she loved. Lo and behold, 2 terms later, she says, "Oh, I want to change schools." I'm like, "Really?" She's quite introverted. So she sits an exam to get into the school. She gets an offer, and we're looking through the box of goals like 9 months later, and she pulled it out and she started to kind of have a little cry. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I wrote this down and I forgot." And she
Oh,
goes, "And I have those friends around me and I'm at that school." And I'm like, I didn't even know she'd written the goal. So there's great power in writing down, but then the letting go, I think, is really important. So yeah, so it's profound. It's profound
it's
what can happen.
it is. It's so beautiful. And I know just from my experience, I remember maybe a year or two ago, I'm like, one day to my husband, I go, I'm going to talk to Dr. Peta Stapleton. I'm going to go to an energy psychology conference one day. I'm going to meet all these people. I'm going to like just get my name out there and get to talk to them. And then I was tapping on the resistance. I'm like, there's no way. No, they're
That's
not,
that little
he's not going to say yes to me. And these people don't want to meet me. Who am I? And then, of course, here I am sitting with you a lot quicker than I ever anticipated it happening. And maybe the same with when you were with Joe. It was kind of like, oh, she said yes. Okay. Like, I guess I'm doing this. Let's go.
And that
So
conference absolutely exists in the US every year. So, the one conference that lots of us we do go to is the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, because it is a like-minded coming together, and it is that intersect, I think, between what people are doing in clinical practice that's having a profound effect on their clients, but then the other side of, yeah, hey, we know this now through research, and if you're interested, here's how it works. And that intersect. And you're right, you go to those conferences and they're not draining and they're not a drag, they're uplifting and they're inspiring. And I think, that's really important for people to be part of as well in these journeys.
yes. So maybe I'll see you there one day.
Yes. I plan
One
to
year.
be there every year. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's incredible. And I
Yep.
just love being in that community because everybody's doing their own work.
Yeah. And that
Everyone's,
is what is, I would
yeah.
say, highly different in these type of fields than perhaps some of the other traditional psychological fields where, and no disrespect to my colleagues because I teach CBT, like I do have to teach it, but a lot of people probably feel that it's not relevant to themselves as, the lecturer or the psychologist in practice or the therapist. It's kind of like, no, it's something I teach my clients. It's not something I do on myself.
Mhm.
Yet when we're using EFT tapping in a session, or you might be using another energy modality, you're doing it on yourself at the same time your client is. So you actually can't escape it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think, that borrowed benefits that, really stands out, particularly in tapping and things like that, is huge because you actually are having you're getting the impact then and there. So back in the day, I no longer see clients. I just can't do it anymore
Yeah.
in terms of my life, but I always was able to walk out of my practice day still feeling really intact and not drained and still energized. And it was because most of the time I was tapping in session with every client.
Oh, what a game changer. I worked in community mental health and I do walk-in counseling, and you'd have to see 5 to 6 clients back to back, barely have time to eat lunch. And at the end of the day, I remember my husband is like, do you have any compassion left? Like, you just want to be left alone. You don't want to talk.
Yep.
And that was such a, like, oh, I'm probably doing way too much. But it's funny when you say, when you're with a client and you're just doing tapping, you can leave the end of the day still regulated because you're doing it with them.
Yep.
What a game changer. Not even just
Absolutely.
client work, but therapist burnout.
Amazing.
Amazing. Yes. We need more of this in the community.
It's getting out there.
Yes. Um, so what I was going to say next, now I'm probably going to not explain this very well, so I hope you're kind of picking up what I'm putting down, but I heard something about, like, when we're tapping, our brains are still open to restructuring or rewiring like 4 to 5 hours
Yep.
after we tap. Can you
Yep.
explain that a little more for everyone and for
Yep.
myself?
Yes. Yeah. So the theory sitting behind this is memory reconsolidation. So anyone curious to read more, Dr. Bruce Ecker writes about types of therapy that have this impact. So it appears, and they've done animal studies, and I do believe now human studies, it appears that when we, I guess, start to talk about something that is important to us, that's distressing, that perhaps we want to change. And this occurs even if we're complaining. So if we are complaining to a colleague or going over something at, home at the end of the day with our partner or family, but we're not doing anything to kind of interrupt it, but we've just opened it up, if you like, we are still having that effect, which is why we say, if you want to tap and complain or ring your friend and whinge, make sure you're tapping at the same time as complaining, because at least you're getting an effect. So it's like the brain, Joe Dispenza actually has a video, the brain and the neurons open up a little bit. So they kind of disconnect, if you like, and there's this ability in that rewiring for about 4 to 5 hours after you've kind of opened up that neurological connection, because you've started to talk about it. If you don't do anything in that period of time, it'll just lock back down and stay the same. If anything, it can make the feeling of distress or anger or whatever it is stronger. So that's Hebbian's principle, that neurons that fire together wire together more strongly. But if in the moment of talking about what really gets you kind of intensified in emotion, you do something to change the perception of that, then when it rewires down, you have a different response. So that 4 to 5 hour gap seems to be really important. So it's either going to rewire the same as what it was because you just complain and don't do anything, or you've done tapping, you've done EMDR, you've done something else somatically, you've, I don't know, written a letter and that helped, like anything. We're not just saying tapping's the only thing. That next 3 to 4 hours after you finish that session is actually really important to protect the brain so that it locks back down and obviously keeps the new changes. Now, Meryl Kemp out of, now I've got to remember, Sweden or Norway, somewhere in Europe, has just written a paper where they're looking at this with phobias, spider phobias, snake phobias. They're saying the best thing, and we've always intuitively known this, the best thing you can do to get it to lock back down is sleep. Go to sleep. And if you think about clients that perhaps do a really big tapping or EMDR session or something like that on something really distressing like post-traumatic stress disorder, they're often really fatigued after that and they do want to sleep. And if we can actually recommend that they either have really quiet time, they can have a sleep if they can, or you're pre-planning that you're going to do that kind of work in session, that is the best thing for the brain. Merrill's paper is saying you absolutely need sleep for that consolidation. I don't know, through our tapping trials, we just make sure people are protected, but they don't always sleep and the changes do stick. They don't remember their cravings or their chronic pain. So it is really important, and we're trying to get that message out that even if you're just debriefing at the end of the day about your day, if you don't do anything to change it, you're actually just making it stronger. It's quite important to, like, my husband is not in my field, he's an engineer. So if he wants to come home and complain about the people that are, with their rules and regulations making things difficult, he knows that if he wants to just debrief, he just at least has to tap.
I love that.
I'm like,
Yeah, do it with me now.
we're not necessarily going through the process. We're just tapping one point. I tell you, it halves the amount of complaining, and 2, it may actually have an impact, on future encounters with that same person, that kind of thing. So, yeah, the girl, I have 2 daughters. They're quite funny. They're like, Dad, you gotta do this.
Oh, I can see my daughter being that way. Like, so when she's going through something, she had a really hard night and now she's kind of afraid to sleep in her room. She's 4. So I tap her and we go through it and I say, just tell me about, what you're afraid of, what your worries are. And I'll just tap through the points and tap through the points. And now I see her doing it to her little brother. So I have a 2-year-old.
There you go,
And
beautiful.
so she'll say, do you need me to tap you? And so I'm not home tonight doing this interview. I had to print off how to tap for dad so that he wouldn't mess it up.
Give enough points, like it'll be fine.
Right. But that's good to know, because then I'll say, you know what, you can just tap 1 point. Dad can just do that. Cause he apparently last time that happened, she was like, you missed the nose point, Dad. It's this one. It's this one. You need to do this one. So like, she's
She's on it. She'll be right. She'll be right for life.
she will be, yeah, she will be a tapping master by the time, because she'll ask for it too before bed. She said, oh, it makes me so sleepy. I love it. When she's kind of frustrated, she'll say, can you tap me? Like, I need some help right now. And it's amazing how quickly it works for kids. Like, it's like their brains are like, oh, all right, it's done. She'll be like, don't tap me anymore. Like, she'll just swat me away.
It's enough. And they don't have the layers we have, and they don't need the science and the evidence. And they're just like, that makes me feel good. That's enough. And then they do go through their teenage stages where they're like, oh, it's a bit weird. But, they come back around again. So
did you do that with your kids?
Yeah,
you did.
So I knew tapping before they were born. So I had learnt through my colleague. I hadn't married yet, and certainly hadn't had my daughters. So yes, absolutely tapped on them as babies, and they had tappy bears, so they might bring them in. Can we do tapping? And they're now 21 and 17. So we kind of went through the full spectrum of that's the most stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, that's okay. So I would tap in front of them. So I still might walk around the house and tap quietly to myself. And then they would say, are you tapping on me or dad or, whatever. And then full circle, one of them's now studying psychology and music therapy and obviously showing tapping to her little students. And the other one will come in and ask for tapping. So they come full circle. They've seen me at conferences. They've met all of the EFT world because they've traveled to conferences. So they know Joe Dispenza, they know David Feinstein, they know Carol Look, they know Brad Yates. So they're just like, tapping's normal. It's just like, we know all these people. So yes, they've had an unusual life as far as, they're like, Brad's been to our house, like,
he
played our piano. So
Oh,
it's quite funny. Yeah.
It's so awesome to be able to introduce it to them at such a young age too. And it's good to know that they'll go through a phase where they're like, what are you doing? And then they'll come, hopefully they come back around.
That's right. And we just keep tapping in the meantime. We just keep tapping. So,
yes. Now, I know you described yourself as an introvert. You're a Virgo. I'm a Pisces. We're sister signs. I'm married to a Virgo, actually.
And one of my sisters is a Pisces, and we're very close.
You just get along really well. So, being introverted by nature, how have you been able to use tapping to go through like your own expansion? Do you use it before things all the time still? Yeah.
And I have written a book with a colleague, which Hay House publishes too, called EFT for Introverts. So the Kindle version is still out there. So if people just jump on Hay House or Amazon, EFT for Introverts. Yes, I would still identify as an introvert. I mean, people probably think I'm an ambivert, that kind of blend, because socially, like I lecture or I present or I do whatever. Way back in the early days, I would say I was an anxious introvert, because there's sort of 4 types of introverts. And I wasn't anxious, probably worried too much about what people think, but I was really perceptive as well. So I could walk into a room and kind of think, oh, something's happened here. But I would internalize that and think, this is when I'm a teenager, it must be about me. Like I learnt after I learnt tapping that I just had the ability to pick up energy in a room, that it wasn't necessarily about me because I wasn't present. So tapping sort of helped with that level of anxiety when I was kind of in my early 20s. And then when I found EFT and I was doing it with my clients, and obviously under the radar because we didn't know how to explain it to people, I was tapping on what will people think of me, if they know that this is what I do. And then I got the opportunity to do research in my academic job. And then I really was tapping on, oh, wow, what if I'm judged? What if I'm ridiculed? What if I'm blah, blah, blah? And so I was always tapping on that kind of stuff, and wherever that, and I can't even remember now, but wherever that went back to, I'm the eldest, maybe there was memories around, getting in trouble, being responsible, that kind of thing. And even writing my book, the science behind tapping, trying to find the sweet spot of writing this book on, journal articles are a bit dry sometimes, cure for insomnia, versus is anyone ever going to read this book kind of things, trying to find that sweet spot. I was tapping, and I didn't think at the time I was the best person to write such a landmark book. I thought other people probably should have written that, so I tapped on that.
Oh,
And so it's funny that people say to me, we train therapists these days in how to use EFT therapeutically. And people will often go, oh, you don't have to worry because, you're an academic and blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, no, it's worse for me. I've probably got more,
yeah.
ability to be criticized. But what I've done is I've always done tapping. So it appears, people do support the work we do, and they want to, publish stories, write publish your book, do media, things like that. But I've done tapping all the way through. So I've always tapped on. You asked, do I tap every time now? No, I don't get nervous, or I don't get anxious. Like, that baseline isn't there. People wouldn't think I'm an anxious, nervous person. But I might tap after I go home from something. Like, probably 15 years ago, I did one of my very first conference presentations on tapping. It was a public forum. So it was, the general public that came, and it was overseas. And there happened to be one person in the audience that obviously clearly was there because they didn't believe in tapping and was trying to ask kind of questions to trip me up. I didn't know what was going on till after the fact, but apparently they were labeling these people as trolls, that they were coming to these public forums purely with the intent of trying to undermine the speaker. But I remember going home and I felt uneasy, but I didn't know that information at the time. And I just did tapping after this talk, kind of tapped for a couple of hours that night, going, oh, what's going on here, that kind of thing. And it was quite funny. About a week later, I'm back home and I get an email from someone else in the audience who said, I just wanted to let you know I was sitting near that person that was asking those questions. And it was so bad that I went to answer, but the host of the conference jumped up to protect me and answer. And that's when I realized something's going on here. But this email, this lady had said, she said, it's quite funny, because I'd asked everyone to do some tapping in the audience. And she said, and probably unconsciously, that person that was asking those negative questions was actually sitting there tapping on their hand in their lap, even though they were asking. And I wouldn't have known that, but she'd sort of emailed. And it was just one of those moments that I'm like, oh, wow. I wonder if she'd have emailed me had I not kind of cleared myself. And I don't know, but yeah, it was some interesting things like that that do occur after the fact. When you kind of tap, you clear yourself, you become refocused again. And, I knew what we were doing wasn't harmful and wasn't negative. We were trying to help people. And then you get those emails. So amazing.
It's those moments when things happen, like when you clear it and then something happens right after, it's like that really makes you believe that we're all connected. Well, that's what I think. When things happen and it's just like, that's not a coincidence, I don't think. It's like we're all shifting our own consciousness and we're all kind of influencing each other one way or another. That's a whole nother topic. that's a big topic.
Yes.
But anyway, I was going to say, what big projects are you working on next? Is there a goal setting book?
There isn't one. We have a lot of goal setting kind of tip sheets and masterclasses that we do share with because we support our community and help our practitioners that might train kind of, get more skilled training along the way. There's no book at the moment. Is there a book? There is a book that is being written. So I am coming back to the topic of sleep issues and insomnia. So that's actually my next book. So my next book is around that. I have had one come out since the science behind tapping. So I did publish on EFT tapping for memory improvement. So it's a very practical book. It goes right through from, our children learning to spell, schoolwork, studying for exams, right through to memory loss disorders and dementia. And it's a very practical book about how to tap for memory issues. So that book's out now. So sleep at the moment, we're running research trials. So 2024 at the moment, we're running tapping for vision issues. So I'm replicating Carol Look's trial from about 2012, where she had run a trial for her community, an 8-week trial. And so Carol kindly gave us videos for this trial. So it's a true replication. And we've just finished the first 8 weeks, and it's just wonderful. We have hundreds and hundreds of people in that trial. And people are kind of typing in their support group how much their vision's improved. So obviously they're wearing glasses or perhaps got some sort of vision issues. But emotion has a profound impact on clarity of vision and fatigue and tiredness. So they've been tapping on this for 8 weeks. And people are just writing the most amazing things in this last week at the moment of their trial, going, oh, wow, I'm going off for my optometry visit and, you know, these glasses are too strong for me, or I keep kind of being able to read small fine print on the back of things now, and I couldn't. So, yeah, we're having wonderful kind of outcomes. Parallel to that, we're doing a lot of research at the moment in primary schools. So, you know, students from 4 years to 12 years. And so I have finished 2 trials with Joe Dispenza with thousands of children in Brisbane in a couple of schools. And one school did tapping. So they did tapping, and the rest of them have been doing meditation every day for 10 weeks. So we're kind of doing a lot in that school sort of space and supporting teachers as well. So lots sort of happening there. And there's always kind of projects. There's always things.
I can see why you're busy.
And I teach here, and I'm about to teach. We are the second university in the world that our master's students in psychology do learn tapping. So I'm about to go in middle of this year to teach them. So they learn it as a therapy technique for their students, for their clients, while they're a student. So Paris was the first and Australia's the second. So that's amazing to be able to teach it now.
You are an inspiration, just how much you are in the tapping field. And I'm sure it never gets old when you get those comments back and you're like,
it doesn't.
Wow, this is really helping people, you know, and like, I can only imagine how fulfilled you feel just teaching this tapping stuff. And it can be this tapping stuff, like it's no big deal, like that it can be self-applied and that you can really teach them in such a short amount of time. And then the results that you get, I can only imagine how amazing that feels, just to know that you've made an impact on even children. Like that's such a great place to start in primary schools, and, you know, bullying and getting along with everybody. It's just, and we know how quickly, well, I know firsthand how quickly it works with kids. So
that's right. And it just became, we wanted it to become a really natural thing that you do when you're stressed, you know, whether that is meditation or mindfulness or tapping. But you're right, friends and I still message each other, oh man, this just happened. And they're like, why are you surprised? And I'm like, I don't know. We do brain scan studies, and my colleague here analyzes the brain scan studies, and we had our chronic pain, and we knew that 6 weeks worth of tapping had to help their pain, but we didn't know if it would show up in the brain. And when he comes running down the hallway going, it worked. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, even though we know from their answers and their subjective questionnaires that they feel better or they have less anxiety or depression or whatever it might be, but the brain scan matched. And we're like, oh, yes, you know, because you don't know. So.
And every time it's like a little surprise. It's funny. Yeah. When I tap with people too, it's like how quickly it shifts, and you're like, this is amazing. It's like, of course it's amazing. And we already know we've done this like a million times. Oh, that's awesome. So I kind of talked about what big projects you're working on next. And I guess I'll just ask, what inspires you to keep going? These results, the surprises?
Yeah, probably. And I genuinely like what I do. So I have a nice balance between, obviously we run the research, but I teach. So I teach, and I teach at that master's level. So I'm really getting the students before they're about to go graduate and they're seeing real clients. So we really do get to sort of teach them these process-based skills, which I find really rewarding, you know, rather than kind of maybe superficial kind of topics and things like that. So, yeah, I think, you know, just that what you said, we're helping people, we're changing lives. And, you know, I do seek sort of, you know, something out of that, it has such a huge impact. You get those emails where people are like, I forgot I had pain, or I don't eat that food, and we're all a bit speechless, and we're like, oh wow. So
Like, what
Yeah, it
the hell?
keeps me going. I enjoy it. I like writing, so I think at some point as a young teenager, I probably thought, oh, I might write books for my life. I don't know what I was going to write on, but yeah, I still do that too. So I'm still an introvert. I still like my time. I do have puppy time with my cavoodle and quiet time where we just read magazines and everyone's off doing their own thing, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just having a tool like tapping, I think, to support yourself, so that if you do get overwhelmed, because yeah, sometimes there is a lot going on and we do say no to too many interviews and things like that because it just can't, there's not enough time in the day. But tapping does support the body in that. And I do a range of techniques. So I don't meditate. Don't tell Joe Dispenza, I don't meditate as he would like. But, I do other techniques and things like that, and practice sort of Ho'oponopono and different visualization techniques and things like that. Bit of havening, things, accelerated eye movements. So I think the more tools people have to support themselves in that, body space, really that's what kind of keeps you in one piece. And at the same time, looks like you're living a fairly balanced lifestyle, which I think, that's the ultimate, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And before we go, do you know your human design? Do you know what type
Uh,
you are?
pro- Probably not what you're writing on. And so
Yeah.
I'm certainly aware of the field, but
Yes.
no, please,
Okay.
you probably,
Well, you need your birth time. And I just wondered if you knew what type you were, or like your profile line. I just wondered if you had like the researcher, there's like a one line who like loves digging into information. I'm like, I wonder if PETA knows what she is, because how interesting would that be? No. Oh,
as
you
no, I
have
don't know. I do know my birth time.
gotta look it
Um,
up.
I had a parent who used to make, she still does. She likes to make you wait till your birth time to get your presents. And I
Oh,
happen to be born in the afternoon rather than in the middle of the evening. So
yeah.
middle of the morning. So yes, I had to wait the longest because I was in the afternoon. So yeah, that's why I know my birth time. Um, no, yeah, there's a lot of systems out there that explain, yeah, lots of things about ourselves, but you can work it out. Tell me,
Yeah,
Des.
right? I'm like, okay, Peter, I need your birth time. I'll email you what you are. And I'm
Sounds great.
like, we won't do it here live, but I
Yeah.
just think it would just be so interesting to see.
I will be
Um,
curious to find out.
yes. Okay. Well, I will shoot you an email and we'll
Thank
find out. And lastly, where can everybody find you? Like, I just want to say thank you. This has been the time of my life. I hope it's been fun for you too.
always love talking about tapping. No, absolutely.
um, yeah,
Thank
where
you.
can
Yes,
people
so
find
on
you?
all the socials, so Instagram, Facebook, obviously LinkedIn, Twitter, sit there too. Instagram seems to be a really big tapping kind of place. So we share lots of case studies, lots of stuff coming out of the research, lots of things like that. So obviously just my name, Peta Stapleton. Obviously website, petastapleton.com is my homepage. My EFT training. So if people are curious about training, and we deliver the method that we research, is evidence-based-EFT.com. So that is where we obviously store lots of the information about our research, what's happening in the training world, that kind of thing. So either of those websites will get you there, and any of the socials.
Awesome. And then you have 2 books out. Well, you have the 3. You have EFT tapping for introverts, the science behind tapping, and EFT for
Yes.
memory improvement. Perfect. So you can find
Yeah.
all those books.
You can find all those there and all the links and all the normal places. Yeah.
And I'll
Yeah.
link them in the show notes too, just
Thank
so
you.
everyone can find where to find you and your books. And yeah, thank you.
And that's it for today's episode. Please share it with anyone else who wants to learn more about human design, or anyone who may be on their personal growth and spiritual development journey. You can DM me on Instagram to talk about what resonated with you, what you learned about yourself. I love hearing about human design in real life, so I really appreciate those conversations. And if you would like, you can leave a comment, a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. That support means the world. Thank you so much for listening. I know time is a valuable currency. Take care.